This morning we're going to run just a little experiment. The experiment should take no more than a minute. And I'll give you the directions for the experiment first, and then we'll try this experiment. What I'm going to be asking you to do here in a moment is to stand, and then I want you to reach out and verbally or physically touch the people around you. Just tell them good morning, give them a little handshake, not only to the people to the left and right of you, because that probably might be a family member, but to go to the person in front of you and the people immediately behind you and extend yourself to them with some style of salutation this morning. So that's the experiment. If you'd be good enough to stand, and let's perform this experiment. Morning. How are you? Morning, big guy. Morning, buddy. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Morning, Joseph. Good morning. Yeah. You know why this guy eats snails? Well, thank you, everyone. You can be seated. That turns out to be the key point of today's gospel reading, because what today's gospel reading is talking about is the importance of touch. Now, there's a real good chance, especially if you took the time to do this, it looked like everyone did, you now feel closer to the people around you now than you did before, because you made physical contact with the people in your area. It is amazing how touch, be it verbal touch, physical touch, changes relationships, breaks down barriers. You know, in today's gospel reading, coming out of the 7th chapter of Luke, verses 11 to 17, it is indicative of all the gospels. In all the gospels, every healing in the gospel, every miracle that occurs in the gospel, Jesus always uses the same method to effect a healing or to make a miracle, and that is the fact that he always decided to touch. Now, that's what we're going to find in today's gospel reading. Let's take a look at verse 12 and 13 of the 7th chapter of Luke this morning. Now, it starts off by saying, as he, that's Jesus, drew near to the gate of the city, a man who had died was being carried out, the son of his mother, and she was a widow. A large crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he was moved with pity for her and said to her, "Do not weep." Now, I want you to just keep your eyes gazed on that, because initially to me, it doesn't make any sense at all. It just seems like Jesus is telling this lady to do the wrong thing. He's telling her, do not weep. Now take a look at it. This lady was a widow. So we know that somewhere along the line her husband died. It's not recorded in what I just read today, but her husband had previously died. That's how she became a widow. It doesn't mention whether or not she has any daughters, but we do know this much: she had just one son, and that is the son just most recently died. Now this lady is dealing with some powerful loss. She's dealing with the loss of a husband. She's dealing with the loss of a son, and Jesus said to this lady, "Do not weep." It seems like he would be saying to the lady, go ahead and cry, get it out. You know, whenever you're grieving, whenever you're dealing with something difficult and you are crying and you're mourning, those around you should always encourage you, go ahead, get it out, pour it out. Allow that to come out. It's got to come out sooner or later. Do it now rather than capping it and waiting for the explosion to occur later. But he tells this lady something very uncanny. Do not weep. Now, he does it for a reason. It isn't cold, it isn't being callous, and he isn't giving her misdirection. Why would Jesus tell this woman who's dealing with the loss of a husband and currently the loss of a son, why would Jesus say to the lady, do not weep? Any idea? He's predicting her future. Because what he's going to tell the lady, you won't need to weep, because currently you're weeping the loss of your son, but guess what's going to happen? I'm going to effect change, and your son's going to rise again. Let's move to verse 14 and 15, see what happens here. There it is. It continues on. He, Jesus, stepped forward, and he touched the coffin because the son's inside of the coffin. At this, the pallbearers halted, and he said, young man, I tell you, arise. The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave the young son back to his mother. And when he handed the son, who was now alive, back to his mother, obviously she stopped what? She stopped crying. Her tears of grief turned into tears of joy. And Jesus is saying, look, you don't have to weep because I'm going to make this difficult situation better. I'm going to bring about redemption in this grave situation through touch. How many people want God to touch them this morning? You might say to yourself, where is God? Right now, Father, I've been going through the motions. I know I'm in Mass this morning, but I've lost my relationship with God. I don't know where He's at in my life. That's perhaps what has prompted me to go to Mass this morning. I want to re-engage and reignite my relationship with God. Leo Buscaglia, the child psychologist, said that the most powerful healing tool in the face of this earth is the tool of touch. When you reach out and touch someone, that's why you feel different about the people around you now than you did before the experiment, because you just reached out and touched them. It feels good when someone does that. It feels good when you're at the store and a complete stranger does say good morning, does say hi, does open the door for you so you can get through. You just feel automatically a connection to this stranger. The wall was torn down. Aeschylus, the ancient Greek philosopher, 480 BC, he said that we should use our hands to lift someone up, not to beat someone down. That makes so much sense. The ordination ceremony, when a bishop makes a man a priest. And we had an ordination yesterday here in the Diocese of Greensburg. One young man was ordained a priest for our diocese. Now, the ordination ceremony, it takes a long time, about 2 hours. But what I find amazing in the ordination ceremony, the actual conferral of the priesthood occurs by a physical touch, and a word isn't spoken. A man is ordained a priest when he walks up to the bishop, kneels down in front of the bishop, without saying a word, takes his hands, places his hands on a man's head. And when he takes his hands off the man's head, at that point, the man is then a priest. And watching this young priest yesterday walk up to the bishop, at that point, not a priest, but when the bishop placed his hands in this man's head and lifted off and he stood up, at that point, the man was a priest. It is how touch changes everything. Families who are estranged from one another, what does that happen? If you're estranged from a brother or sister, another family member, why? Because you're no longer in touch. You're out of touch with each other. You got to be in touch. You got to engage those around you. You have to somehow physically engage those who are your friends and your relatives if you want to keep them that way. Verbal connection, verbal touch, very important. Physical touch, very important. The handshake, the pat on the back. Being close to God is extremely important. You might say to yourself, I want God to touch me, but I don't know. He hasn't been in my life for a while. Where is He? Well, maybe this is what God would say to you. A friend of mine, his wife, and he had been celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. They got married when they were 19 years old. I was the best man at their wedding. I was visiting them the other day. We were having this great conversation. And I said, remember when you two were going together? You're 16, 17, they were high school sweethearts. And when they were going together, 16, 17, 18, they got married at 19. And after they were married, the same thing happened. He would always be the guy who drove the car, and his girlfriend, who later became his wife, she would sit right next to him. She was to the left of the center of the seat, smashed right up against him. If you were in a car behind them, you would look and say, that body has two heads. I mean, they were just squeezed together. Squeezed together. It was an amazing thing to see. I was always impressed by that. I could get my girlfriend in a car, and he was able to get his girlfriend right next to him. I could never figure it out. What a gift he had. Now, as life traveled on, what actually is amazing, he said, yeah, you know, Kenny, that's what happened. She used to sit real close to me. He said, nowadays, whenever we go somewhere, I'm still driving a car, she's way over at the passenger door. She's smashed right up against the door. She's almost inside of the door skin. And then she said, yeah, why is that? Why am I sitting way over there when we used to sit together? And he gave a very interesting answer. This is what he said. I believe it's the same answer God would give you if you said to God this morning, God, where are you in my life? I want you to touch me, but I haven't seen you lately. I look and I can't find you, God. Where are you? How far away did you go? And when the wife said to her husband, yes, why don't I sit next to you anymore? And I sit way over the passenger door. And he said this. He said, I know why. And she said, why? And he said to her, because you are the one that moved. You're the one that moved. I'm still driving a car. But as we've been married, each year you've been working your way over to the other door. Another 10 years, you'll be in a back seat. Jesus would say to you, you moved. If you're saying, God, where are you in my life? Jesus, where are you? I haven't seen you around lately. I feel alone and abandoned. You're not in my life. And Jesus would say, here's what has happened. I'm still in the driver's seat. You're the one that moved. And if you want me to touch you, you want to feel me, you want me to be able to love you, what you need to do is to scoot back over and come back into my range so I can again be a part of your life. And that's really what the gospel reading is talking about. The importance of touch. Psychologists say that every human being yearns to be touched, either verbally or physically, or with a simple smile or a nod of the head in a positive way. We yearn to be touched by another human being on a regular daily basis, not just once every quarter. Heavenly Father, touch me. Allow me to feel you. And if you're saying this morning, God, you have abandoned me, where are you? God would say to you this morning, I have not abandoned you. He would say to you what my friend said to his wife, you're the one that moved.